Good afternoon and welcome to everyone joining us for today's Interact with Interaction webinar featuring our guest speakers, Scott Winter, Head of Product Management for Interaction, and Simon Elvin, Commercial and Marketing Director for Tikit. This month's webinar is GDPR, Reporting What Matters with Tikit. My name is Dave and I'm a Marketing Associate with LexisNexis. I will be your host for today's session. Interact with Interaction webinars are complementary to our customers and have been designed to help you get the most from your software by providing you with industry knowledge plus time-saving tips and best practices for using Interaction. The format for today's webinar is the presentation provided by Scott and Simon, followed by a question and answer period. All of our attendees will be in listen-only mode for the duration of our presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them via the questions pane located on your webinar control panel. During the last 15 minutes of the webinar, Scott and Simon will answer your questions. Also, please note that we are recording today's event and all attendees will receive an email within 1 week with a link to the recording and slides. Also, there is a brief survey at the end of the webinar today that we ask you to please take a moment to complete. Your feedback will help us in planning our future events. Scott and Simon, at this time, I will turn the webinar over to you.
All right, thanks, David. And thanks, everyone, for joining with us today. I know this is a lot of time out of your daily routine, and we appreciate it. I think we have some good, valuable stuff to share with today, and this is a perfect opportunity to start to work closely with our partner Tikit to, in addition to what I'm going to show, how they can work with Interaction and how they do work with Interaction to achieve your needs around GDPR. I think that there is somebody on the Lexis side. I think we're having some muting problems. I hear a lot of background noise, so I don't know who that's coming from. But anyone that is a Lexis person, or Simon, if you have people around you, we need to work on that.
So quiet here.
All right, yes, I'm not sure if that's David or who.
It's very quiet here.
All right, so I don't know what I'm hearing, but maybe it's me. So first off, with reports. So GDPR, I've been trying to just be very transparent with what Interaction has been doing to get ready and provide the tool sets that you guys need to execute your interpretations of GDPR and to basically help protect yourselves. So with the tool sets, we have the code that we're building around suppression and controlling new contacts coming in. This is in the March 30th release coming out. So to help with the timing and provide tools as we build them, we have 6 reports that we built through SSRS that are actually available today. So I'm going to say this a lot, many times, that these are available. You can go download them. You can start using these today. And it's really to start identify the data that you have. In addition to, you have our little getting in shape icon at the bottom, basically just getting your data in better shape. So if you have duplicates, if you need to do some merging, association cleanup, anything that we can start doing to prepare your data to be in the best shape. So if you need to suppress somebody, you're not looking at maybe 4 or 5 contacts that need to be merged together. So with these reports, here's the 6 that we built, and we're going to just take a couple of minutes and go through each one and some of the value props that I've heard in the market and why we built it. So to start, and of course, we're having technical difficulties today. Simon, Simon, if you could just hit the next slide for me. There you go. Thanks. So the first report is around contacts with missing address, phone, or email information. So this is really just to start understanding what is the good data that we have and where are we potentially missing information that we need to go do some research on. If we need to start looking at what city and country the person's in, if your interpretation is really just focused on people in the EU, we can identify where there's some gaps there. You have the filters at the top of the page, so we can always go through and switch the information that we're looking at. So this was just around the quality of the data. Now, after we built it, there was another use case that came in, and this was around the interpretation of what would be like B2B versus B2C marketing. And if you're B2B, the interpretation for them is, we don't necessarily need the consent because we have the company that we're working with, and they're an employee of that company, so it falls under the B2B category. But a B2C, if I just have the person's personal email address, not a business email address, now I need to look at that record a little bit differently. And what you can do here is if you do a search or the filter by missing email address, this is now going to show you where that business address is missing. And if there is a home email address, you're going to see 2 rows for contact. And on the left side with the name, it's going to be a little bit lighter gray. I don't have an example for this. But so if it's Scott Winter, you'll see dark bold Scott Winter on the first line, second line a little bit grayer. So a way to visually see that this is the same person. And then you'd have the yellow missing email address above a home personal address. And now you could start to put together this list or these contacts that you potentially need to do something different with than your other contacts. If you do one more click, Simon, there's a little memo that comes up in the top by the filters. And this is going to, it basically just says that you might see some information with missing zip codes or phone number. That data might be had been missing already, but your filter is running on one of the areas of criteria above that you were looking for. On the next report, this is around contacts with no activities in the date range. So the concept here is really, do I have a business purpose to have this contact in my system? And it kind of, resembles the client methodology. If you don't have a billable record within 2 or 3 or 4 years based on your firm process, that client is no longer an active client. They would be inactive, but they're still in the system. So you would come up with your interpretation of what is a time frame where you have business purpose, that this contact should be in your system, and you would put that time frame in, and you'd be able to find the list of all the people that are outside of that. And then again, this might just be information that you purge out of your system. Now, the next report is very similar to this, and it just allows you to do a filter on a specified activity. So some of these reports you're going to see have multiple business cases, not just GDPR, but this would allow you to say for a certain type of activity missing within that date range, and then you'd have all the contacts that fall into that list. The next report is contacts known only by one active employee. So this has, I think, a lot of value in lateral hires lateral hiring process in addition to GDPR. But as we look at, again, business purpose to have somebody in the system, who do we need to maybe talk to about the person to identify some of these contacts where they only know that one person in the firm, but then also to do maybe searching if one of these people is potentially leaving, to be able to identify those contacts and have a succession plan or how you can keep the business, or be very proactive and come up with a list of all the contacts that do just have that one relationship, and how can we expand the relationships with these contacts, get more people involved. And again, this could get into cross-selling initiatives and growing the overall business. So again, there's quite a bit you can do with that report. The next one is around contacts not known by any firm personnel. So here's all the orphan contacts living in interaction that nobody's connected to. And maybe people have left and you've archived or you've deleted, whatever that might be. But now here's just a list of people that don't know anybody. So you have to ask yourself around the business relevance to have that contact in the system. Do we need to have them? And you can run that assessment. But again, just really providing who might not have those, or who is in your system that really potentially shouldn't be there based on that parameter of GDPR. And the next report, apologize for all the next, I hate when technology doesn't work for us. So similar to the contacts known by one employee, we have one around specified alumni. So that again, identify where you have minimal relationships that you would potentially leverage or work with in different ways. Now, I think the last one, my next slide is going into the how you find these reports. So once they're installed, and there's instructions online to help set up SSRS reports if you've not done this already. We had the package that came out in October. This is the second set of our SSRS reports, and we're going to have more coming out after this. But once they're installed in the system, you can have these run from Interaction for Microsoft Outlook, IMO. They're in the web client, they're in the Windows client. And here's just a couple areas where you can see where you can find that information. Now, the next slide is going to be around what is actually tied to the release. And if you do one more click, it's going to give us an arrow around the new extended searches that are going to come out. So basically, this is taking the SQL behind the reports. And the reports, again, we finished them. We want you guys to be able to start leveraging them and understanding your data today. But you'll be forced to manually move people into lists and do, maybe a working list, and do something with them in the web client or somewhere in Interaction. With the release that will come out on the 30th, we're taking those reports, again, the technology and the SQL, and putting those into extended searches. So now they're going to live in the Windows client, and you'll be able to run that search from there, which now you have all of your results provided in your results screen on the right side, that we then can tag these records, drag them into a working list, purge them, do something with them, but you have actionable ways to work with the data now that you have the extended search. So that piece will be on the March 30th release. And if you go one more screen, this is going to be the website that you can go get these reports today. Again, I'll say over and over, and I'll ask myself a question at the end: are they available today? These are there for you. I think that we had a little bit of a miss in October when we released the first round of SSRS reports with a actual physical release of Interaction, and there is the perception that those reports were tied to the release. Unless we add a new data table, which we did for one of the reports around usage tracking in IMO, there is not any tied reason that an SSRS report should be tied to that release. And they are available at any point. And ever since SSRS lived, if you're still maybe on one of our handful of clients on 5.6 SP4, which would not be not make me happy, but if you were there, those SSRS reports are available on that platform as well. So these are available. You can go to our support site, our account managers, client advisors, a lot of people to help you guys find those, and hopefully give you some tools that you can start using today as we wait for the release to come out on March 30th, which, to be very transparent, we are still green for the release. Everything is looking very, very good with it. Again, if we were yellow or red in any way, I would want to let the market know, but everything is going smoothly, and we are still good for that target date of March 30th. So I'll hand it over to Simon now, and then we will have our questions at the very end. So take it away, Simon.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Scott. So what I wanted to do with my part of the session is to look at our e-marketing tool and how it relates to GDPR, if we ignore the slight dyslexia that I clearly had on the first page. Three things I wanted to go through. High level, what do I need to do? A look at personal data and e-marketing, and then the use of e-marketing to facilitate compliance. So what do I need to do? Well, GDPR is about protecting, that is, the data subject's personal data. So you can only hold my data if I say that you can hold that data. I need to be able to tell you that you can hold that data in an easy and unambiguous way. You have to record when I said you could hold the data and the mechanism I used to agree that you could hold that data. You must tell me what you're going to do with my data. So that is, what is my data going to be used for in your system or systems? You can only send me the types of communications that I agree for you to send me. And I must be able to ask you to stop communicating with me at any time. You must take care of my data and make sure that that data doesn't become displayed or available to any third party who doesn't have the right to see it. And you mustn't keep my data any longer than you need to. In addition, I have to be able to exercise my specific rights with respect to your data. And the key rights that I have with respect to the data, to my data that you hold, is the right to access. That means I can see the data. You have to give me the data. You have to show me the data that you hold on me. The right to data portability. If you're holding data in your systems, I have the right to take it out and put it somewhere else. I can object to you processing my data. I can ask you to get rid of all of my data. I can ask you to change or correct any data that you hold that is wrong. And I can ask you to restrict the processing to only certain types of activity. All of those things, in order to comply with GDPR, you need to do. In terms of the personal data that Tikit holds, or that's held in the Tikit e-marketing system, we're currently an on-premises solution right now. Although watch this space. Therefore, you are both the data controller and the data processor, because the data, the personal data that we hold, is sitting on your systems, not in any external system, not in a system that Tikit owns and controls the data. But we do hold personal data in our database. So in addition to the data you might hold in interaction and the data that we use to send marketing broadcasts, we hold some personal data. And of course, personal data means effectively any information that could be used by somebody to uniquely identify an individual. And we will hold information such as names and email addresses and that sort of thing. Things like company name, email address, and the information related to your mailing history. So there are specific responsibilities that users of e-marketing have with respect to that data, but of course, e-marketing could happily be used as a tool to help the firm as a whole drive compliance. And what I want to go through in the next section is how you can use e-marketing and how we've configured e-marketing, how we've changed e-marketing with the latest release due by the end of this week to assist you with that compliance. So if we look at some of the basic things that you're going to need to do, and the collection of consent, for example, data is going to get into your system, at least data is going to get into your system, into your interaction system, and it could come through Outlook, it could come as a link from, say, the practice management system if you're linked up in that way. It could be created directly with interaction through IMO or the web client or however. It may come in with consent, conceivably. You could gather consent with a paper form, for example, and then add it to add the record to the database with consent already in place. But most likely, you're going to need consent after the contact exists in your CRM system. So what do we need to do then? This contact's been created. We need to note the fact that consent to hold data has not yet been obtained. We don't want to be sending marketing communications to go to that content until consent has been obtained. Now, that is part of the regulation if you are an individual and you're linked to the firm as an individual, as a personal, with your personal email address. If you have a business relationship with the firm, of course, then there is a business justification for communication, because we have to be able to communicate with you in order to transact business with you that you have contracted us to do. But realistically, until you've obtained consent, the safest route would not be send any marketing communications unless you've obtained the consent and unless you have some idea of the type of communications people are going to want to hold. So we need a mechanism in place to obtain consent, and we need to put we need a place to be identified where we can store that consent data, and that naturally would be the CRM system interaction. So there are going to be fields in interaction into which we want to place data. Whether or not we've obtained consent, potentially 3 options for that: yes, no, or pending. No would indicate that consent has been withheld, and that would be a transitory process until such time as we remove the information from the system. But it will be in a pending state until we actually obtain that consent. We need to record the date of consent. We need to know what type of communication was consented to. Is it just the service communications, or can we send marketing type communications as well? And we can go to other levels of granularity on that if we want. How was consent obtained? Paper form, e-form, whatever mechanism was used to obtain the consent, again, must be unambiguous. And we've added in, from our point of view, a GDPR, what we've termed a GDPR block field. Yes, no, and the initial setting for that will be yes, while consent has not been obtained. And I'll explain where that GDPR block field comes into effect a little bit later. So then I need a consent form. I need to be able to send people a consent form, and of course I can use e-marketing to do so. So if we have a look at this example consent form, which we have put together, I'll just run through that and explain the various elements of the form and what they do, or at least what happens automatically potentially. So if you look at it, we are asking consent to hold for a particular individual. We're seeking your consent to hold your details in our database, and we'll hold your data in accordance with our privacy policy. So clicking on that link will display the firm privacy policy, telling the data subject how the firm is going to hold their data and what they're going to do with it. So what we'd like to do, unambiguous consent, this must be an unchecked box. You have to have a positive action. So this form is automatically has a cleared box here every time it's generated, whether or not you have given consent before. So this is you have to click in here. If you click in there, we'll automatically set the GDPR opt-in field to yes, and we'll set the GDPR block field to no. Once we've obtained consent to hold, we'd then like to find out what type of communications people are happy to receive from us. Communications about the service, so that's transactional communications, communications related to doing business with the firm, related to the matter that I have asked you to serve. We're setting our field that we've termed, in this case, but you can call it anything you like, of course, opt-in for service communications to yes. Would you like to receive invitations to events and webinars? Again, opt-in for events and webinars field, and newsletters and product updates. In our case, it's product updates. Of course, in your case, it would be service level updates, other services that we may offer you. Or, of course, and a note here that you may opt out of these communications at any time, and we'll provide a mechanism to do so. Do not send me communications of any type. We'll set the GDPR block field to yes. So you may consent for us to hold your data, but you may not want us to send you any communications. Again, potentially, you can still send service level communications to people. If this is a prospect, not a client, this is someone who's got into the database somehow or other, they obviously have to have the option to have their data removed from the system. Oh, sorry, confirm consent first, of course. Once you click that, we have all of this stuff is actioned. We're going to set the GDPR verification date field to whatever today's date is automatically. We'll set the consent mechanism field. How did you obtain consent to an e-marketing form? We'll add an activity into interaction to say when consent was obtained and how consent was obtained. And we'll send an email to the contact with a summary of their choices. So this is the type of email that will come back. Thanks for taking the time to complete our consent form. This is what you've consented to. You've consented to us holding your details. You've opted in to receive communications about service, opted in to receive newsletter and product updates, opted in to receiving event and webinar invitations. You can also click here to see the details we hold on you. And it's signed off by an individual from the firm, whoever has potentially compliance officer. And again, removal from the database. If someone clicks on the remove my details from your system, we'll set the GDPR opt-in field to no, the GDPR block field to yes. And again, as I say, this is transitory in the period of time, 72 hours that you have, between being notified that you should remove data from the system and having to remove it from the system, where you can review it. You can see whether it's a valid request for removal. Again, if they are a client of the firm and you have to communicate with them, then they don't really have the right to object to that. If it's again, if it's personal, we're going to send an alert email to a group of individuals to say this person has requested to be to have their data removed from the database. And then at the end of that, we'll display to the contact a process page which says, thank you for your request. We'll remove your details from our database within 72 hours. and you won't receive any further communications. Again, we don't really want to send them an email because they just told us that they'd like to be removed and therefore don't want to receive any emails from us. So what have we achieved by doing that? We've dealt with point one. You can only hold my data if I say you can, because you've asked them unambiguously whether or not you wanted to hold the data. And the way we've done it has been easy, and it's required a positive action on their behalf to consent. We've recorded what that they said we could hold their data, what we said they could hold, and how they agreed to it. We've told them what we'll do with their data via the privacy policy, and we have recorded the type of communications they're prepared to receive from us. The other thing that we've said we need to do is to allow individuals to exercise the rights that they have the rights with respect to their data. So again, there is a request form that people will be able to access from a hyperlink on any of the communications that we send. And if they click on that, then it's going to construct a page where you can indicate which of the rights that you have that you would like to exercise, in which case we'll set the field in interaction that indicates which right has been requested. We'll email that request to the data controller group. We'll set GDPR block to yes for most of those requests. If it's only a right of access, then there's probably no reason to stop sending them communications while you review the nature of that request. However, if it's any of the other requests, it's probably good practice, and as I say, we'll set this automatically to make sure that they don't get communications in the meantime. There's nothing worse, presumably, than asking someone to remove your data from the database and a day later getting a marketing email from them asking whether you want to take up the offer of some additional services. And then we'll put a process page up that says, we will respond to you within the next 24 hours. We'll let you know how we'll progress, because we've got to evaluate that, and then we have time to come back to you later. So fulfilling those rights requests, what can we do from an e-marketing perspective? So obviously a rights request for something like, I'd like to see the data you hold on me, affects systems other than just e-marketing. We're a gateway that records the fact that someone wants to have that information, but because we hold personal data, we have responsibilities within the e-marketing system under those rights. So right of access, we have the ability within e-marketing to provide a summary view of the contact, the ability to send all of that information back to a contact via PDF, and again, set the GDPR block field to yes during review to make sure we don't send them anything. Similarly, data portability, we have to be able to export all of the data in e-marketing out so that they can get access to it and load it into another system potentially. So again, from the summary view of that contact information in e-marketing, we can export a machine-readable version of that in a standard format called JSON, which they would be able to read into another system. I cannot imagine any circumstance in which they would want to read our e-marketing data that we hold about them into their system, but we have the ability to do so. And that sits in the reporting area under this data compliance section that we have now added into e-marketing. Export to JSON. Rights requests, right to erasure, automatically set GDPR block to yes, and we erase through that field that you saw on the last screen that said forget contact. Right to object and right to restrict processing, again, GDPR block is set to yes while you evaluate. A manual review to see whether or not the contact details need to be removed from the system that they have requested it to be removed from. It may be that they want it removed from the marketing systems, for example. It may be that they're happy for you to process things in the practice management system and send them bills, but not send them marketing communications, in which case it may be prudent to remove them from there. So we provide the ability to do that. And obviously the right to rectification, set block to yes until such time as you've evaluated and rectify the data that they have objected to, the data they say you are holding in error. There's your forget contact. The effect of the GDPR block field, of course, then, if that is set to yes for any reason, we don't want to be sending them communication. So we have added that as an automatic exclusion reason. So if you load a list of individuals into the e-marketing system, and one of them has that field set to yes, we will automatically block it, and we will give you the exclusion reason. You can see the traditional in an exclusion folder here, which would be, let's say they're in the send no marketing communication folder. In this instance, this one is tagged as blocked by GDPR. So that's someone who has objected or in any way interacted with the system in a way that has caused us to set that GDPR block field to yes. And we've achieved there, we've allowed people to exercise their rights with respect to their data. Longevity of data, we're not allowed to keep that data in perpetuity. We've got to be able to erase it. You will have to erase it from other systems once you have decided that that contact is no longer an active contact. So we have added in an option here, if you enable it. And you can delete data from a contact automatically 2 years after it was last used, or whatever value you decide to put in there. So automatically, all records relating to that contact are truncated at this period, so that you're not holding data any longer than you need to. And that's number 8. And then the last one we're looking at is protecting your data. Contact data is potentially exposed if an email is forwarded. So if I have an email that comes in with a link in it that says, edit my contact details, and I forward that on to another individual, there is the danger that they will click on that link and at least read the data. Now, there are 2 ways of dealing with this. Well, 3 ways really. You can choose to do nothing and accept the risk. You can gate the data, or you can password protect the data. Now, gating the data is effectively the softer option. And what the softer option does is when they click on the click here to update my contact details link, you push up this page before they are allowed to go through. You tell them who the form has been generated for. You tell them that if they click on the confirm button, you are confirming you are the individual that it is directed to. And if you're not, please close this window. Now, this has been, after review, this mechanism has been adopted by a number of UK law firms. So they've decided not to implement what you might call a stronger measure, which would be to request a login before seeing the contact details. And the fact that whoever has received this email clicks on confirm, they have felt that that is sufficient to deal with their obligations under GDPR. Or you can password protect it. So again, you click on the update my contact details link, and you have to put in a password at this point, and there are automatic processes in place to allow the contact to have a password emailed to them. And then the next time around, they can simply add in the password and log in to change, amend, or view their details. That would be the strong mechanism for doing that. So in that case, given that I've been able to go to my contact details, I have been able to ask you to stop communicating with me, and I have protected my data from being exposed through normal e-marketing activity. Oops. And there we are. Those are the release dates of 2 things. Interaction, March the 30th, and the Tikit e-marketing functionality version 6.3 is available today, and we'll be sending out a release note on that tomorrow.
Great. Thanks so much, Simon. Yep, I'll take over for a minute, then we'll hand it back off to Dave. But great stuff. I hope everyone sees the hard work that Tikit's been putting in for GDPR, in addition to the webinars that we've been doing as we're getting ready for Interaction, for what's coming out, and the close partnership between Tikit and Interaction to make sure that when you're doing stuff in Tikit, the right things come over to Interaction, the fields that you then can have other searches on, but overall how we work as an ecosystem to provide the best tool sets that you guys need to run and operate your business. So with that, we'll give it to Dave to go over some reminders, and then we'll open the floor for questions.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Thank you both so much for your informative session today. This does conclude the presentation portion of our webinar. Folks, as a reminder, if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask them via the questions pane located on your webinar control panel. Before we start with our Q&A, I have a few reminders to our listeners today. As Interaction customers, you have access to webinars, newsletters, tip videos, product updates, and more. Our Interact with Interaction program is designed to help you optimize how your firm uses Interaction. Don't forget to update your communication preferences to receive these ongoing valuable resources. Also, if you aren't a member of the Interaction CRM LinkedIn group, join today for best practice sharing and continual updates on what's happening in the Interaction world. You'll find links to update your communication preferences and to join the LinkedIn group in the presentation slides provided to you after this webinar. Well, we had a very interesting and relevant topic today, and we've got some questions coming in for Scott and Simon. And if you gentlemen are ready, I will read the first one. We have a question from Catherine. In regards to the reports, how can we use these reports to show relationships? For example, if we want our admin staff to work on cleaning these records based on who they support, how can we run those reports rather than these bulk contact reports?
So so some of the reports have actually the filter for the employee, so you could see who you're searching for and filter it out. And then the other option would be to, if that filter wasn't in the report, and I would just need to jump in and double check and make sure that they're all there, to do an export, and then maybe filter in Excel. But I believe in many of the cases where there is a relevant employee, that you'd be able to do search on that employee to pull them from your list.
Okay, Chris has a question. Can we use the reports with 6.20.63?
Yeah, so that will, I think actually Interaction Tikit sounds like we're pretty close on some of our numbering. So from the SSRS report for Interaction, yeah, these reports are compatible with all the versions. Again, it's really just based off the SSRS technology with Microsoft SQL reporting. But again, the big thing that would be different is all the other items we've been showing in the webinars with the suppression and controlling contacts coming in. Those will require the latest 6.2 update that will come out March 30th.
Okay, next question. In regards to right to erasure, Paul says, I understand you will delete the data, but how are you going to ensure the contact is not added back in their interaction again? Are you going to leverage the suppression functionality being released on 3/30?
Yeah, I guess that's the question for me. We will delete the data from eMarketing. However, typically data only gets into eMarketing from Interaction. So the functionality being released by Lexis in the end of March should go towards preventing that contact being added back in and therefore getting back into our product.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Catherine has another question here. Do SSRS reports search the entire database, or can you select which folders to search?
The SSRS, this is going through the entire database. So it's not, I'd have to check with our consultants to see if we'd even have the ability to go into the folder structure. I think we probably could, but at this point in time, the reports aren't designed to look at folder structure. So this is looking at just every contact that's in your system. And again, with probably to add to that, and even the other question, I went through these reports. So like the contacts known by only one active employee, this is just pulling up all those contacts in this tab 1. We do have the known by, so you could do a find for that employee or do the export so that's not in the filter. And I would have to think a little bit more of, you know, how this report is running, and would the filter make it more complex in some ways. So I think to both of those questions, this is the first round of GDPR based on, you know, what we heard in the market. I do think that coming May 25th, there's going to be a lot of unknowns that are answered, and as more people are executing their process for GDPR, and we're finding you know, other areas to improve, I have resources and velocity in our future releases to also make tweaks to everything that we're doing for GDPR today. So this is kind of like CRM is a growing, evolving strategy in a firm, not just the software. I think GDPR is not just a single release. This is going to be a growing, evolving strategy that we help build more tools or update our tools as we actually see how this impacts businesses. And, you know, will you ever get a phone call and say, hey, forget me, and go through this depression? It's more right now we're giving you that homeowner's insurance that you never want to have to use. But if you do need to use it that one time, it's there for you. And again, the process allows to save quite a bit of possible penalties that could be in play. But we will keep evaluating these and taking enhancement updates and reviewing them with the market, and continue to update as we go.
Okay. Chris has a follow-up. So the reports she asked would access archive folder and dupe folder?
I'll have to double check that. Let me get with the consultant that we leverage to build these on our side, one of our ProServe guys, and let me just double check that before I answer that. So I'll send out a follow-up, maybe with our marketing staff as we send out the links to do the update. We'll find the best way to answer that, but I will determine that and follow up. And I think we also have the email addresses of who's asking, so I can follow up with you directly.
Okay, Scott, great. As we have a little bit of time left, I do encourage the audience to ask any questions via your questions pane on your webinar control panel. I thought I'd bring that up another time here, so take that opportunity to offer a question if you want to. In the meantime, Scott or Simon, if you have anything else you'd like to add in the next few minutes, everybody I'm sure would be interested in hearing.
Yep, reports are available today. So that little pitch, but yeah, just to emphasize that all of the SSRS reports that we're doing. So there's a lot of value in putting these together based on the last set that has like DCM tickets and reports that have been asked for through support that we can leverage our SQL experts to put these together in a mechanism that it doesn't, you know, within the product, you don't get those type of specific searches and reporting standards. So these are available. Any system that supports SSRS, you'll be able to leverage these. And again, there's going to be more coming. So if there's any other reports that you guys are dying to have, just let us know, and we will put them into our backlog of items to review, and then process that for a potential future release.
Excellent. In the meantime, we had a couple of quick questions come through. First one, can you let us know where to get these presentations? Will they be emailed to registrants?
Yeah, so everybody that registered, and even if you weren't able to make it, these are being, I think the recordings are being sent out to everybody afterwards. So the recording takes about, I want to say it's a week or so to process that and put it together, but within a little bit of time, you will have this information from the webinar.
Okay, and Catherine has another question. Will we be able to tweak the searches once they become available?
That's a good question. I should know that one. I have not done as much with the SQL and the extended searches. So Scott, let me follow up with you on that one just to be sure. I know there's a SQL backend piece of it. Extended searches can be built by our clients, not just the consulting. This isn't like a code change that we're making updates to. So I want to say I'm pretty sure they can. You just have to have the SQL knowledge to put that together to do the update. But I will confirm that just to be sure for you.
Okay, great. Simon, I think there's one heading your way here. Is LexisNexis still going to create an interface on how to remove a contact permanently from the database, or are we relying now on Tikit to manage that?
Just to be clear on that, our remove contact functionality is only for the data that is held within our system. So we are only removing the data that's held in e-marketing. You would still need to have a mechanism for doing that in any other system that was holding personal data. One of those is interaction. So you will be relying for the data in interaction on the functionality that Lexis are providing at the end of March.
Right, and we are. That is still our plan, and it's in our final round of regression testing, and actually ready for our partners to pick up and do some testing with. But basically, you have the ability to purge, and if you want the ability to have the minimal amount of information that you identify to remember that a contact asked to be deleted, you have the suppression technology that severs the ties from all activities. It deletes all the information about the contact except for last name, email address, and phone number. Email address and phone number are optional for you to turn on. And then we encode it. The database will also have the ability to be encrypted. But every time a new contact comes in, we'll do cross-reference against that encoded table that, again, a human set of eyes, you don't know what it is, just a bunch of characters. But if we make a match, that contact will be kicked out and they will not be allowed back into the system. So you can either purge all the way, or if your interpretation is to be able to keep a little bit of information, that will be available to you as well on March 30th.
Okay, thank you, Scott. In the remaining time, I'm just going to throw it back again to our listening audience. If you do have any last questions you'd like to ask, by all means, send them right now. We do have a couple of minutes. So as we sit here, Simon or Scott, if you have any other remarks you'd like to make, we'll do this one more time, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Only from my point of view to say anyone who needs or would like a little more data on what we've done with e-marketing, or would like to see exactly how to do those things that I've mentioned and the additional functionality, do drop me a line and I'll sort out a small demo for you.
Okay, thanks so much, Simon. Well, that concludes today's webinar. I really would like to thank Scott and Simon once again for their excellent presentation, and to all of our attendees for taking time out of your busy day to join us. I do have a few quick follow-up reminders. All attendees will receive an email within 1 week with a link to a recording of today's webinar and slides. In closing, there is a brief survey at the end of our webinar today that we ask you to please take a moment to complete. Your feedback will help us in planning our future webinars. Again, thank you all for your time today. I hope everyone has a great afternoon.